Welcome to this episode of Icons. Icons is a program where we take you through the different events, the people, and the circumstances of the Bible. We are still in the Old Testament right now. We have finished the first 5 books, which together constitute the Pentateuch. And we are in the books of history right now. We are in the 2nd book of Samuel, where we continue the story of David. In the last series, we had started with the story of David and Saul. We continue that series. We have a wonderful panel to help us in this discussion. We have with us Reverend Dr. Joseph Thondiparambil. Father Joseph has been for many years a very valued resource person here at the Divine Institute of Bible and Spirituality. He has also finished his PhD in Scripture from Rome, and he is also the mentor of this program. Father, welcome on the program.
Thank you.
We have with us Marina. Marina is from Chennai, and Marina works in the corporate sector. Marina, welcome on the program.
Thank you, Abraham.
We have with us Sneha Fernandez. Sneha is from Goa, and Sneha till recently was a teacher in a primary school. Sneha, welcome on the program.
Thank you.
We have with us Jude Govius. Jude is from Mangalore, and he is the president of an export firm in Mangalore. Jude, welcome on the program.
Thank you.
So we'll ask Father to help situate exactly where we are. Father, could you help us, please?
As you have already mentioned, we are in the historical books of the Old Testament. While dealing with the historical books of the Old Testament, we have to keep in mind a particular point. It is not the presentation of history as such. Maybe that's a small clue in the first letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 11 says, "These things are written for us as an instruction." And therefore, the persons, the events, and the characters, in short, the story, the history in the Old Testament is written not for the sake of presenting some historical details, but on the contrary, what happens there, that is, has to be a lesson for the present day readers and listeners.
Yes.
And continuing in that same mode, we are dealing with the story of David and Saul.
Yes.
Saul was the first king of Israel. Because of his infidelity and disobedience. Now he was rejected, and David was chosen in his place. So we have come up to that level when David takes over as the king of Israel.
Thank you very much, Father.
Father, Saul was an enemy of David. But then why do we see David lamenting over the death of Saul?
The better way of putting it, the relationship between Saul and David, may be that they were rivals. Not exactly enemies, because it was Saul who admitted David into his service, and David was serving him in the court, though David was chosen as the legitimate king by Samuel later. But now, why is it that in spite of all the so-called negative experiences which David had from Saul, when he heard about the death, the tragic death of Saul, it is said in 2 Samuel chapter 1, he made a loud lamentation for Saul and Jonathan.
Yes.
There is also an indication when that Amalekite came and informed David that your enemy Saul is killed, he did not rejoice at it. And he asked for further explanation, and then he said, that Amalekite said that he himself killed Saul. Yes. Then David asked, how is it that you dared to raise your hand against the anointed of the Lord?
Person. Yes.
So therefore, David is still considering Saul, in spite of all this negative background, as the anointed of the Lord. Because that means he is the one who has been chosen by God to lead the people of Israel and given a mission. Anointed means Messiah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And God has put this man as the Messiah, as the anointed over Israel. How is it that you raised your hand? And that is one aspect, that the great regard that David had for this office.
Yes.
Secondly, that also shows his generosity of heart. Though he had all this kind of negative experiences, he was not keeping any ill will or grudge. That must be the reason. God says that I have found a man in the son of Jesse, that is David, who is according to my heart. That's the greatest compliment that David is getting. A man according to my heart. God is generous. Therefore, David also is generous. Therefore, I would say the reason why he raised a loud lamentation for Saul is because of the generosity of his heart.
Generosity of his heart.
I think, Father, also when in the earlier episodes we had seen, even when David had the chance to kill Saul,
Correct.
he did not take that chance because he even told his people that, he is an anointed of the Lord.
Yeah.
I dare not touch him to kill him.
And not only that, while referring himself versus Saul, David says, why are you that you are chasing a dead dog? That is one of the expressions that he uses. And there was a chance when David could easily kill him. But then he said, I will not touch. I will not raise my hand. There is something beautiful about this man.
Yes. I think, Father, also David is the only person about whom in the Bible it is said, as you said, mentioned earlier, that the Lord God said, a man after my own
A man
heart.
according to my heart. Correct.
Father, did the people of Judah accept David as their ruler?
So when we go to the history of Israel and of Judah, there was some initial problem. Because there were those people who were actually inclined more to the family of Saul. Yes. Because the whole Israel knew that Saul has been elected as the legitimate king of Israel, yes, and Samuel has anointed him. Yes. Therefore, as far as the people are concerned, Saul still remains the legitimate king of Israel because Samuel had anointed him. Yes. But it is true that later on he was rejected, but for the majority of the people, Saul is still the legitimate king. And only in course of time, the people of Judah, because we know that the 10 tribes constituting Israel and the 2 tribes constituting Judah, already from the very beginning, there was a clear-cut division between these two. Though we call them the people of Israel, so as far as their psychological, what they call belongingness is concerned, they were considering themselves as 2 separate entities. And that's why first it is the people of Israel, meaning thereby the members of the 10 tribes who accepted him as the king. It is only later that the people of Judah also is coming to that level.
Father, what is the meaning of saying that there was a prolonged war between the house of David and house of Saul?
That we can understand in the context of political struggle, so to say. Saul was killed, but then he had a son, Ishbosheth, that was his name, who is supposed to be the legitimate successor to the king. And not only that, commander-in-chief of Saul, and his name was Abner. Abner anointed Ishbosheth as the king of Israel. Well, David is there. And Joab, he was the commander-in-chief of David. So ultimately, it was a struggle between Abner and Joab. So we can say it was a struggle of succession. And these 2 people did not yield one to the other. And that was the reason why there was a kind of prolonged dispute as to who is the legitimate king.
See, they also went to war against each other.
Yeah, correct. There was a time when they were engaging in real war. Because today, when we look at the history of Israel, we know that David is the person who is chosen by God. But it was not so clear to the people of that time. Because for people of Israel now, Saul is the king. And according to the practice of that time, his eldest son becomes the king. That must be the reason why Abner anointed Ishbosheth as the king.
Father, what do we learn about the behavior of Ishbosheth to Abner?
It is an interesting story in the sense that it was Abner who anointed Ishbosheth as the king of Israel. At the same time, according to the present practice of that time, at that time, the wives and the concubines of a defeated king or an enemy, the one who becomes victorious, he gets these concubines also as his women. Accordingly, Saul had some concubines, and the name of one, Rizpah, that is especially mentioned. And it is said that Abner had made some undue advances to Rizpah. And Ishbosheth questioned Abner about it. There is also an indication, it is said, Abner was growing strong in Israel. And now, by taking possession of the harem or the concubines of a defeated king or a dead king, the one who inherits this, he becomes, so to say, the leader. So most probably, if at all Abner has made this undue advance, that was one way of asserting that he is the man.
In control.
And then Ishbosheth questioned him. Why is it that you are, because I am the king.
Yes.
I have the right. But why is it that you approached the concubines of my father?
Yeah.
So now we have to approach the whole thing in the existential context of that time. It was a matter of power struggle. So it has to be. And then most probably Ishbosheth must have been feeling that he is becoming weak. And this is only a kind of legitimate expression of his grievance. As why Ishbosheth put this question to this Abner.
Father, how do we understand the behavior of Ishbosheth to Michal?
Yeah. This Ishbosheth, Michal, etc. may be strange name. He is actually the one who succeeded Saul as the king of Israel. And then there is a story again about Michal. Michal was the daughter of Saul. And Saul had promised Michal to David, provided he produces 100 foreskins of the Philistines as dowry. And David did that.
Okay.
The original intention of Saul was, in the effort to procure 100 foreskins of the Philistines, that they would be killed. Not only that he was not killed, instead of bringing 100 foreskins, he brought 200 foreskins. And instead of that gift, Saul did not give Michal to David. And Michal was given to some other people. And therefore, David has this grudge. And now Saul is dead. And Michal was given to a person called Phaltiel. So that was the name of her husband. And then when Abner, he said, now I'm going to leave Ishbosheth and I'm going to come to you. When Abner, when he changed all the side to David, David said, but there is a condition. When you come,
You have to
bring this Michal with. Because you know this original
grudges
Yes.
there.
yeah, you can say that grudge is there. And then Michal was brought. But then there's a very sad situation there. This Phaltiel, it is said, he came crying after him. Please don't take away my wife.
When they went to meet Abner.
Naturally. But Ishbosheth took this lady to Michal. But now what comes as a result of all this is, we can understand David as a man who by all means wanted to get his original so-called wife. He got it. But that getting was without having any due regard for the human feeling or the feeling of that woman. So it is against her will. It is against the will of her husband. And therefore, no human right is respected.
Yes.
But that has to be understood again in the background of that time. Because the king could do whatever he wanted.
Yes.
And the women, by and large, they had not many
had
rights
no say.
as it is in the today's world. So all these things show that even in the history of Israel, things are happening exactly as it is happening even today. Might is right.
Thank you, Father.
Father, can you justify the behavior of Job to Abner?
Yeah, again, it needs a bit of historical background explanation. Now, Abner, who was the commander-in-chief of Saul, after his death, Saul's death, he anointed Ishbosheth
as a
as the legitimate king of Israel. Then things were going that way. And it is at that time, it is said, there's a small indication, that Abner went to one of the concubines of Saul, who is actually the legitimate possession of the Ishbosheth. But then Abner was very angry and he said, are you questioning me for this kind of things? In that case, I am going to join David. And he is also bringing a theological reason for that. The Lord has promised that the throne will go over to David, not to you. Therefore, I am going to join him. And as we have said, Abner approached David, and David put a condition, and Michal was produced there. And then afterwards, there was some agreement that I will get all the, Abner said, I will get the support of the whole of Israel. And then they entered into a pact or a covenant. Okay. So now David sent Abner in peace. So far, so good. It is at that time Joab, he is the commander-in-chief of David. He comes back and he heard that Abner was here. Abner was his arch rival.
Yes.
And Abner has joined David.
Joined David.
And then he said, why is it that you send Abner alive? He has come here
You should
as a
have killed
spy.
him. Yeah.
His intentions are good. He has come here as a spy and to see our weak points.
Yes.
And he was blaming the king.
Correct.
And it is said, Joab, maybe out of his love for David, that's all what we can presume now. He followed Abner and killed him.
Kill him.
But that was actually against all the existing law at that time. Because once you enter into a covenant, that pact has to be respected. But then this pact, which the king himself had entered into with Abner, that was not respected. In the place of that, now Joab accused Abner of having ill intention, and that is going against all manners of those days, or accepted moral principles of that time. Therefore, that cannot be justified in any way. What
Also,
Abner
Father,
did.
I think the reason why Joab went so much against Abner was because Abner killed Asahel.
Yeah, that was also, he had a grudge.
Grudge.
Yeah, one of his brothers also was killed by
Abner,
So he thought this is a good occasion to take revenge.
Revenge.
So exactly, though a few years have passed by, that revenge and grudge, it is there.
Father, in 2 Samuel 2:10-11, it is mentioned that Ishbosheth, Saul's son, reigned over Israel for 2 years.
Yeah.
But at that same time, the house of Judah followed David. They did not follow Ishbosheth. And also that David was king over the house of Judah for 7 years.
Okay.
So how is this, I mean, the house of Judah, is it apart from the Israel, the rest of the tribes are on one side, Judah was on one side?
See, after the death of Saul, who was the legitimate king over all the whole of Israel, there was some confusion. Ishbosheth became the king in the place of Saul.
Yes.
But then there was some sort of animosity between the northern tribes, 10 tribes, which is called Israel, and the southern tribes, 2 tribes we can say. And they did not have this coherence of psychological unity for various reasons. Because Jerusalem, the temple of the Lord, and the place that is specially chosen, that was in south.
Yes.
And the southerners always claimed some sort of superiority
Over the
to the
northerners.
northerners. That is visible even today, perhaps, in some aspects of Indian politics.
Geographical.
Between North India and South India, we can say that. So it was also in Israel. Therefore, only for 2 years, Ishbosheth could continue as king in Israel. It is at that time that Abner, his commander-in-chief, turned side and joined David. Therefore, he could not have a smooth rule at that time. And Abner was killed, and naturally Ishbosheth is becoming weaker. It is at that time Abner has called also the loyalty of the people of north before his death, and they have joined David. So then David becomes a mighty king, not only upon Judah, but also upon Israel.
Also, Father, I had a question. Is that in the beginning we see that this Ishbosheth's name is Ishbal, meaning man of Baal. And then suddenly down the verses we see that his name changes to Ishbosheth, which means man of shame.
Yeah.
So why this distinction and how did this change come about?
See, Ishbosheth, Bosheth means shame. Maybe take into consideration the overall behavior of this man and how he ended. He was treacherously murdered.
Yes.
And that murder is precisely because he put a wrong question to Abner.
Yes.
Because his concubine was actually taken over by Abner. Maybe the people who gave him this name, or nickname rather, considered him as a fool. It is because of his stupidity. Now, we also would say, you should have been more prudent. After all, it is one concubine. You can have many other women. Why put this question and antagonize him? Because in practical politics, you have to be prudent and practical. And therefore, this man, Ishbosheth, who was Iqbal, then he was actually behaving in a stupid way. That must be the reason why this man was called Ishbosheth. But usually in Israel and overall in the Semitic world, the name also points out to the nature of that person.
Correct.
So the name has got a significance. So that must be the reason why he was called Ishbosheth.
And Father, also, Ishbal is the name that he was officially given.
Yeah.
But Baal is a pagan god. How can a man of Israel be...
But then this Baal, that's the name of the Canaanite god. But Baal can also mean Lord. He is the Lord of a man. Therefore, it is from... so Baal has got different shades of meaning.
Okay.
One is, it is a proper name that is used for the god of the Canaanites, Baal.
Pagan.
But then Baal can be also... See, this is how Sarah addresses Abraham. See, Baal, my Lord.
Okay, my Lord.
My
as
Lord.
that-
Therefore, Ish, Baal can means that,
Can be a
that man
Of-
is also a Lord.
Father, my question to you is that, as I've been hearing you, Saul was an anointed one
Yeah.
from the Lord. David was also anointed from the Lord.
Yeah.
But what is that one thing which distinguishes David from Saul so that he is called of my own heart?
All right. Therefore, that we have to take into consideration the overall life and behavior of David. But now, Saul was rejected because of his disobedience. So that we have seen in the first book of Samuel, that he did not wait for Samuel for the sacrifice. And that is why, though he had asked him to wait for him. And it's at that time he says, obedience is better than sacrifice. Just because he was not willing to wait for the coming of Samuel, who was the priest, and who has to take the leadership, actually the leading role in sacrifice, Saul took it over. And it is also said about Saul that he wanted to assert himself. And he made his name known in Israel, it is said. And not only that, he set up a memorial stone for his victory. Now, all these things are going against the understanding of who really wins the war. According to the understanding of Israel people, now if the Israelites are winning a war, it is Yahweh who wins the war.
Yes.
And therefore the king should not take the credit. So now, in addition to the so-called disobedience, he is also becoming a proud man. And later on we will say that, we will see that Saul is actually being eaten up by jealousy. And the jealousy had made him really blind. So this a kind of progressive moral degradation. So that is what happened in the life of Saul. I repeat that word, progressive moral degradation. But then, as far as David is concerned, before God's eyes, now he is, though he had all his failures, we are going to see some such failures shortly, then he was a humble man. Then it is true that he had his weakness. But the moment, for example, he realizes his weakness, he says, Lord, I am sorry.
Accepts.
So that maybe before God, so David was more acceptable. But as you said, that was not clear for the people. For the people, Samuel has already anointed Saul, and he is the legitimate king. And after his death, Ishbosheth should be the one. But there is also, even during the lifetime of Saul, Samuel had anointed David in secret.
Yes.
So that also had taken place. Only very few people came to know about it. And David was not very particular about asserting that either. So he was trying somehow to remain back. So there's some beautiful points in the life of David.
So basically he was obedient.
Yeah, obedient, a good man, good at heart.
Thank you very much, Father. Viewers, thank you very much for being with us on this episode. Till we meet next time, stay blessed.